Why did Lex Luger work so much better in WCW than he did in the WWF? So I know that you weren't watching WWF in '93. I thought, I don't know if other people would agree or not agree, but I thought that Lex Luger's best work was as the narcissist for about 6 months. Because maybe for two reasons. One, he was bigger, so he just looked more impressive. And two, he really leaned into the super arrogance, working slower, more character work kind of thing. Then he becomes the all-American Lex Luger, and for me, in my eye, he slimmed down a little bit, so he didn't look quite as imposing, but also the fans just didn't gravitate towards him like obviously Vince was hoping they would and be the next replacement to Hulk Hogan. And then they also had Bret Hart there, who was the fans' choice. So why did Lex struggle in WWF as compared to his WCW runs, where he seemed to just get over by doing nothing and people would love him?
Yeah, well, in large part because of the body, right? I mean, he was trained under Matsuda in Florida. Florida had the connection to the NWA, and when they brought him in, if you look back at it, them putting him in the Four Horsemen was really the safest place to have him because you've got Arn, Tully, and Flair there, and at one point Ole prior to that. So that this is like a great hothouse as to where we can keep an eye on, keep them close, and when you're in that kind of a group. I could call stuff into you, hey, clothesline him, Lex, whatever, from the apron. So that would be my guess there. The other part is coming from the WCW NWA faction into the WWF. Lex Luger, even though they changed the name, is not a creation of WWE. And Vince had this weird quirk that, and I know there are exceptions to it, but he had this weird quirk of, well, you came from the other company, so we really can't give you that Hogan push because it may show that they're better than we are. Just a little lunacy, this stuff. But and also up there, I think that there would have been the consensus in the dressing rooms in the industry at that time was that people like Lex, Ultimate Warrior, guys like that, they were just getting those pushes just because, as if like it was just. I always love going, I took steroids or whatever. When you take steroids, you're going to work your ass off twice as hard. So you can't delete or detract from anybody for that, especially in that industry. But the camps are now setting up at this time in the late 80s. We're seeing and into the early 90s where it's an us and them world. You're either on that side or this side. And, like what Vince, you can't overstate it enough. And his approach to this, how seriously he took that. You're one of them, you're one of us. And I think, you've heard me talk before about, you have to change to maintain up there, to sort of morph into that mentality. And I think that's part of the reason why, is that Vince is not going to give you that strapped rocket to your ass, like Steve Austin would say, unless he sees you've been indoctrinated into our system. You're one of us now. And, we've gotten rid of that back then. And the other part of this is Lex, and he'll be the first to tell you, he's not the greatest worker in the world. Didn't need to be, had that incredible body. So in a place like WWF where there's uber egos, and I have one too, I'm not pointing the finger at anybody, or talking bad out of sort on anybody. So there, I'm sure there would be a mindset in that dressing room of, one of the horsemen is here. Let's see what he can do, right? Instead of helping him, instead of going along and saying, hey, let's try this or try that, or trying to protect him, they would be very reticent to accept him into that fold because they see him as, we're finally getting Hogan toppled off that top. We're not going to watch another one ensconced right up there above us. And, it's sad. That's the way the industry was and probably still is. But it definitely is that way.
We'll get to a couple of notes I've written down on the match itself. So I've written down very aggressive, good with crowd manipulation here, although I have written his elbows on the floor looked awful, apparently. But this was weeks ago. I can't remember what they looked like. He dropped his here we go. He dropped his outstretched arm onto Brian. So instead of dropping, he was doing like that kind of thing, I guess.
Yeah.
I noticed this as well in the match with Brian, is that Lex is constantly talking in the latter stages of the match. Is that something common Lex would do?
Well, to be fair, there's always a lot of conversation that goes in the ring. Some guy like Bobby Eaton just had this way, like this telepathy about him, the way he used his body language. But that's the quickest way to communicate. The more seasoned workers know how to do that a lot less noticeably, whether it's through the office, the double squeeze, or through the manipulation of words, headlock, calling the spot there to that. Lex would have been one that was probably not so well versed in that because he never had to be. And my guess is by the end of that match, having gone through stuff, which they would have had to have done, knowing Brian, that he was probably getting to the point and asking, like, hey, what's next? Is this what we're supposed to do? Like, just uncertain, like that deep into the match. And I'm sure he could feel it that they're having this pretty darn good match, and he doesn't want to, poo-poo it off the rails. And that would be my guess. If I went back and watched it again, I could probably tell you with more certainty what exactly he was doing.